Let me get started in 1 minute. If you will allow me, you can turn that in at the end of the session. Again, the important thing is to have your name on it. This is the problem that you have in front of you. And there's 6 numbers given. And your first task will be to populate this table with the 6 numbers and the 2 countries. Hopefully you know. And you will try to draw the production possibilities curve with 2 documents on the table. And you have to figure out which variable you're going to put on which axis. And what you'll be putting on the production possibilities curve is what is possible in production, the maximum quantities possible if all of the resources went into one sector, or all of the resources in the other sector. You join out in a straight line, that is called the production possibilities curve. We also said that the simplest way to think of opportunity cost is first to draw the graph, then look at the slope of the graph, and that will be the answer to the question. The opportunity cost of the thing you have on the horizontal axis. the slope is rise and run. So opportunity cost, so let's call this variable X, would be the amount of variable Y you're giving up to get more of X in both cases. The next thing to keep in mind is that the flatter opportunity cost slope is the lower cost, and therefore the country, once you label the two countries, the country with the flatter slope will produce the good on the horizontal axis. Does that make sense? The slope is the cost, opportunity cost. So once you see which has a lower opportunity cost or lower cost, in terms of the two numbers, slopes, then the country with the lower opportunity cost will produce the good on the horizontal axis, and then by default, the second country will produce the second good. So hopefully, when you see that at test time, it will be all familiar to you. Where else have we gone? At the beginning of the class, I decided to use partial equilibrium analysis. What we just looked at is called general equilibrium analysis, and I hope that by the end of today, all of that will be clear. General equilibrium analysis is general. It looks at several goods, or in this case, the entire economy, all at one shot. Whereas with partial equilibrium analysis, you're looking at one product at a time, and you'll see the price on the vertical axis, price quantity analysis. It's called partial equilibrium analysis. It's only a part of the story. And for the first exam, I only need you to get as far as what you see here. There will be no tariff analysis because we will not get to that yet. That's coming in part 2. So I need for you to be able to calculate the consumer surplus value, which is the savings consumers get from paying a given price. Remember, we said they're willing to pay the price on the vertical axis at any quantity, and the price they pay is the price that's announced, so they will have saved. If you're willing to pay 40 and you pay 20, you've saved 20. That's your surplus value. You get $40 worth of value for $20. So you get a product which you value at $40, and you get your $20 back, surplus value. This graph has a tariff. We'll come back to that analysis in the second part of the course. But I say I'd like to start the course with stuff that students remember and that you will use 90% of the time in economics. This is the analysis that's used. We need to remind ourselves it's only part of the story, but it works. It gets us close enough to the answer. We recognize there's some approximation errors, but economists can usually dismiss those kind of errors or state the caveat. We know that they're not accurate calculations, but it's approximate. Okay, I'm going to move that out of your line of vision. And we're going to go back to today. So what we were trying to discuss last time was the assumptions of the general equilibrium theory. I'm not sure why this doesn't look the way it should. Give me a second here. So we're again in chapter 3 and trying to get all of the assumptions understood. So I give you an assignment. I don't remember if I passed this out. Did I pass out this document? I think I did. It may have been all like single lines on one page. Can you turn around? Okay, I'm going to pass out one more copy with spaces in between so that at test time, when I ask you to explain the assumptions, it was more like in this format. So when you're writing your little essays, on the writing portion, the word essays, you're writing to understand the concept. So at that time, some of the open book exam questions would ask you to discuss the assumptions. And what I asked you to do as a courtesy was to watch the video I prepared on the assumptions and be able to explain approximately what the assumptions mean. Then I asked you to do a second thing for homework, to ask, what do the assignments mean to you? And in particular, which assignment do you identify as being interesting that you would want to have a conversation about? I've said in the past that if economics were a religion, I hope I've said it. If economics were a religion, assumption number 1 would be the God, the idol that we worship. Without that assumption, economics does not exist. Trying to find it. It would be very helpful to me if there were noise in the room, human voices, so that this is a conversation that we all enjoy, as opposed to a monologue that I hate. And I'm doing it because I get paid, but if you talk, I'll be able to do it for free because I like talking. So tell me again, what rational means to you. Sometimes I will ask a question, I will keep talking, so just jump in, yes.
Best self-interest.
Just the word rational. Just that one word. If you are rational, you think it's self-interest?
Intelligent.
Okay, somebody else. Huh?
Logical.
Logical. So if you look at the word rational, you would see ratio. That's not going anywhere. You see ration. That's all you can see. But the idea of rational is that you can reason. That's the translation of rational. You can reason. You can do the math in your head. You can do the calculation. And the way I like to describe rationality is, if you tell me you prefer, and even though I'm against sugar water, I'm going to use an example. If you say you like Mountain Dew more than Pepsi, so that squiggle sign in math is preferred. Okay, this is preferred to that. And you prefer Pepsi to Coca-Cola. Then I would expect that if I give you Mountain Dew and Coca-Cola, you will choose Mountain Dew. Even though you didn't tell me that, I have reasoned rationally that if you prefer A to B and B to C, they prefer A to C. The other idea of rational is you reason every single decision. So when economists draw, and I'm just writing here because I don't have another sheet of paper in front of me. When economists draw, I'm going to put goods X and Y on the axes. And we say the consumer has chosen this quantity right here, say 10 and 10. We'd be asking the question, if we give the consumer 11 and 9, call that point A, call this point B. The consumer can tell us if she prefers bundle A or bundle B. She has the math, she has the smarts, she has the savvy to know what she prefers. Every consumer is rational, therefore they know exactly what they want. In this part of the course, we will assume that every consumer in the country thinks alike so that we can aggregate, have an aggregate consumption behavior. We know it's a strong assumption, but we're just trying to push the theory along. I said earlier that sometimes we build a house with extra reinforcements. You don't need them all, the house still stands. Sometimes if you pull one of the reinforcements out, the house topples. So will we topple the economic model if we relax some of these very rigid assumptions? So I'm going to put another point here, point C. And I will call that, just for argument's sake, 11 and 9. So at every point, the consumer gets 20 units of stuff. The consumer can tell you whether she prefers A to B, A to C. So let me write that down. Our consumer tells us that she prefers bundle A over bundle B. She also prefers bundle A over bundle C. Notice what we did in the first case. We said if you prefer A to B and B to C, then you prefer A, C. In this particular equation, you can't say that. All you know is that A ranks over the other two, and you're trying to figure out how to compare B to C, and there is not enough information. But in the consumer's mind, she knows. And then we try to figure out how can we rank B to C in her mind. Sometimes you have to observe the behavior. You have to give them B and C and see what they choose. And then you would say, okay, by observing the behavior, we can tell you how the consumer maps her preferences. But at the end of this analysis, you guys live in a world of big data and AI. Once you get all the analysis, every single point in this hyperplane, we can use fractions and decimals as well. Every point can be mapped. It can be reasoned against every other point. And when we do that, we know which are preferred, and then we say we know which are, I'm going to put that squiggle there. You're indifferent. Indifferent. You're indifferent between B and C. You like them both equally. That means that if the consumer says she likes B and C equally, in this particular mapping, if she says she prefers A to B, let's say she likes B and C equally, but she prefers A to B and A to C. I should be able to draw a preference map. And again, I hope this is not too challenging. This might not quite work. I'm cheating a little bit here. Okay, I'm trying to get below point A. There'll be a map that passes through points B and C, and that is called an indifference curve. I'm going to put IC right here, IC1, indifference curve. Again, I'm writing on this sheet of paper because I don't have another one in front of me, but you're writing your notes so that you're not thinking I'm explaining each assumption by doing this. That is not the case. I'm just being lazy. I guess I could have done this. Anyway, indifference curve. The indifference curve, you need to know the definition of the indifference curve. It is the map of all bundles that the consumer likes equally. Said differently, the consumer is indifferent. I'm going to say between. Between is not the correct part of speech. I should say among, but in this case, between, say B and C, or among all bundles that fall on the curve. So the indifference curve is a map of all of these bundles. So I've extrapolated into a region down here that we have not identified. Let me try to mark that with a different color. There's a point down here, I'll call it point D. There's a point up here, I'll call it point F. And the consumer likes B, B indifferent to C, indifferent to D, indifferent to F. The indifference curve is the curve that passes through all of the bundles the consumer likes equally. Notice that I drew that below point A because our consumer prefers A to B and prefers A to C. But there are bundles, every point in this space, sometimes I'll use the word hyperplane just to sound educated, hyperplane, two-dimensional space. There are other bundles that the consumer likes equally with bundle A. So I'm going to draw another indifference curve slightly higher. And on one of the handouts that I passed out, you'll be able to see that. And I'll call that indifference curve 2. The same way we said the consumer liked, I just wrote 4 things. Oh, right here at the bottom, got lost there. The same way we said the consumer liked B, C, D, and F equally. There are other bundles that the consumer will like equally with bundle A. And the consumer will then say, okay, this indifference curve is the map that shows all of those bundles I like equally. What we know is that any point on indifference curve 2 gives the consumer more satisfaction than any point on indifference curve 1. Is this like too basic and I need to move faster because I want to move faster? You remember this idea? If you've already taken your intermediate level classes, this is not a big deal. But this course doesn't require intermediate. It requires principles. So I can't go too fast. And I apologize to those of you who I'm ready to graduate next semester. Oh, this is like easy peasy lemon squeezy. So that's the apology I'm making here. Every point on indifference curve 2 gives the consumer more happiness or more satisfaction than any point on indifference curve 1. So when you figure that there's a gazillion of these indifference curves, and each higher curve gives more satisfaction. So the indifference curve 2 might give us, say, 100 units of satisfaction, and indifference curve 1 might give us 90 units of satisfaction. And I'll put one up here, ICN, giving us 200 units of satisfaction. A lower one, IC0, giving us 20 units of satisfaction. The farther away you move from the origin, obviously, as you move away from the origin, and I'm going to use a straight line idea here, just to keep a constant ratio. Constant slope, constant ratio of x to y. If I say, what's the ratio of x to y? It's a constant, it's a number. It's a straight line, so it's a number. It's the slope of that line. Origin is 0. So if I increase the amount of all goods I have, you move from a point here, to here, to here, to there, to there, and just follow this array, you'd be expecting that on each new indifference curve, you have a higher level of satisfaction. Clearly, you have more goods. more of good X and Y. So you have more goods and therefore you have more satisfaction. That's another fundamental assumption in economics, part of the rational idea. So I'm going to add to the rationality behavior. Let me pull that back down. More is better. More is better. And I should probably crack open the textbook and see how they do this, but after 43 years, I should know this. Like I know my favorite song, right? More is better. Or sometimes they say more is preferred to less. More is better or more is preferred. Can you think of a case where if someone give you more of something, you would say, please, no, I don't want it. Give me an example of something that you like. First of all, it has to be a good. Let me make sure I say that, good. On the vertical axis and horizontal axis, we're talking about goods. And one characteristic of goods is that they're good. They give you positive satisfaction. So when I ask the question, there's some things that are the opposite of goods, and guess what we call them? Bads. And I don't know who taught you economics, but if I were your economics instructor, every semester, you'll know everything that's in my head, okay? I'll just be transferring my knowledge to you. So a bad would be something that you pay someone to take away from you. Like when you break up and you tell this person, lose my number. You put, okay, you put all the protections on your account so they can't track you in. Okay, that's terrible to say, but okay, garbage. You pay to have the garbage removed from your house. Can you think of other things that you would pay to have removed? Those would be considered bad. Give me an example. It gives you negative satisfaction or dissatisfaction. I need to hear you talk, otherwise I'm going to be bored of listening to myself. I told you that earlier, right? I apologize for the relationship analogy. I use lots of relationship analogies. And sometimes I get into trouble for doing that. Anyway. Something you would happily pay to get rid of. Yes.
All poop in the yard?
There you go. Exactly. Any other last call for an example? Otherwise, I'm with cleaning. You pay. So if you pay someone to do it for you, you get enough dissatisfaction from it. Well, let's not go because the clean house is a good. The utility is from the work. So if you are going to pay someone to remove it from your presence, then it's a bad. But the thing you have at the end is a clean house or clean clothes. So that was a tricky, but I like that. I appreciate that. Sometimes I tend to think in a box and I need people to push me out of my box. Question, comment? Okay. So again, added to the rationality assumption is that more is preferred to less. There's one other thing about that assumption that I probably will draw to your attention, and it will take you back to a stage that you met earlier. Again, I don't know how much economics you have in your background, so I'm going to say, suppose you get utility. Utility is economists' fancy word for satisfaction, okay? You get utility from consuming two goods, X and Y. This is important, what I'm about to say and do. So I have three variables. I have the utility, or the satisfaction, and I have the two goods. These are three variables, but I have a two-dimensional space. So here's what I could do. I could try to pretend, and I hate doing this because I'm really bad at it. I can say this is good X and that's good Y. That's the utility. And now I have a 3D graph, which takes care of every dimension there. And since I get positive utility, I'm going to put a plus sign under those. Let me remove the 2 and 3. This plus sign means that if you give me more of X, I get more satisfaction. If you give me more of Y, I get more satisfaction. So I would show that by two graphs that look like this. Utility from good X against X, utility from good Y against Y. And I need a positive slope because the positive sign here says more is better, more is preferred. So I don't know where this is going to go for you, but check what I'm doing here. The slope is getting flatter, but it's still increasing. More of X is giving me more satisfaction, but it's increasing at a decreasing rate. You've heard that before. If the slope is, let's go a little further. I'm going to change the color here just to keep you interested. And I'm going to go even further and challenge you into thinking of the possibility that the curve could turn down. So let's spend a minute on that. Again, we're still playing with the assumptions to make sure that they make sense because you can't build a house with the right materials, so they're collecting materials right now. What does the negative portion of the curve tell us? We talked about it kind of earlier with the cleaning. What does that tell us?
Ain't that too much?
Too much. Say more.
At a certain point, you
Stop. At a certain point, and that point would be right here, big mark up. Make sure nobody misses what you're saying. At a certain point, keep going.
you, I guess, you realize that too much of that thing.
More, not too much.
Or yeah,
More of it.
more of it is actually a detriment to what to your life, I guess.
And the variable is satisfaction.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
I was thinking like at a certain point, the marginal utilities decreasing.
It's already decreasing from the beginning. That's what a flatter and flatter slope is
Yeah.
saying. So marginal utility decreasing is good. That's where we do our economics. Decreasing marginal utility. So revise that statement, not decreasing, but remember marginal means slope. So yes, it's decreasing all along here in the green portion. So you don't mean decreasing, it is
Increasing. Negative.
negative. Who's that negative? It turns negative. When the marginal utility is negative, it means that more of it is making you unhappy. So I'm a teetotaler. I'm going to use this analogy. You drink too much, you start behaving badly, and the cops get involved. Or you eat too much and your stomach hurts and you're in the bathroom and oh man, why did they eat so much? This utility comes in because you've gone beyond the point of maximum. I think you got that. Again, I apologize if this is too basic. I'm going to go back to assumption number 1 and add one more comment. You may have heard this in some movie. Greed is good. I don't remember which movie. You can Google and tell me. I'm sure lots of people have said that. Greed is good. So greedy, wanting more is a good thing. Gives you more satisfaction. So the yellow portion of the curve does not exist for the economists. Or we stop our analysis before that point. We say, generally, it's a positive relationship, and we don't go to the point where it becomes zero, flat, or we certainly don't go to the point where it turns yellow or negative slope. All of our economics then operates in the idea of rational behavior, means that more will give you more satisfaction. Yes, it will increase at a decreasing rate, but that's okay. That's life. I mean, how many houses do you need? How many cars do you need? More might be better, but if it's not increasing your happiness, then you're just accumulating toys. I mean, do you have stuff at home that you haven't touched in a couple of years, but you don't want to get rid of it? It's giving you no satisfaction, but you're hoarding it. So that's another idea. So the idea economics agents exhibit rational behavior is packed with a lot of stuff. It looks like a small number of words, but it's chock full. As I said, if economics were a religion, this would be the ideal that we worship. So let's spend another minute on the opposite of rational. What word comes to mind when you think of the opposite of rational?
Irrational.
Irrational. Any other words come up? If this seems like I'm really talking down to you, I apologize. Yesterday, I was teaching my class about the sin of arrogance. And I told them, I might be perceived as arrogant. There's old people, 25 senior citizens. I said, do you think I'm arrogant? If you do, I'm apologizing right now. I said, sometimes I talk to my students like they're really young, but they're probably just as smart as I am. They just don't have the experiences I have, but the intellect is like mine. So I'm apologizing now if I ever talk down to you. It's not. It's because I have to take students with 1 class and students with 19 classes about to get the major into this course. Okay, so irrational. Any other words come to mind? Otherwise, I'll keep moving. So, sorry?
Unreasonable.
Unreasonable. Okay. I like that word. I need to think about that. That's good. So do you have any people in your lives who are unreasonable? Remember how we started to define rationality? Irrationality would have to be the opposite of those things or the negation of those things. All right, so irrationality. Let's go back to the pop analogy. You tell me you prefer Mountain Dew to Pepsi, and you prefer Pepsi to Coke. And they give you Mountain Dew and Coke, and you choose Coke. I'm thinking, you're an idiot. But you might not be an idiot. What might you be doing? I ask you, hey, this is the first choice, I like this one. Here's the second choice. And I put the two of them in front of you, and you take the one I don't expect you to do. Why might you do that and still be rational? Okay, think of your first date when you're trying to impress the other person. You say, yeah, I like this, I do that. You don't actually like it. You just wanted to be impressed with you. In other words, you could be lying. That's the point I'm making. When the person says what they prefer, I choose to believe them. And therefore, I say, therefore, if I give them Mountain Dew or Coke, they'll choose Mountain Dew. But you have to recognize that in the information given to me, I'm assuming the person is being truthful. And they might not be. Have you ever told a lie to throw somebody off the trail? So when economists are looking at people's behavior, they're assuming that what they're seeing is rational and can be extrapolated to all the circumstances. Second question. You can jump in at any point, okay? Let's make this a fun experience for me. No, lost my train of thought. Okay, under what conditions? This is a nice test question too. Under what conditions would an individual who prefers Mountain Dew to Pepsi and Pepsi to Coke choose Coke and be rational without any information mismanagement or lying? What would make the person who chooses the Coke rational for choosing the Coke over Mountain Dew? You go to the grocery store, visualize yourself going to the grocery store, knowing what you prefer. Yes.
Maybe there's a press release that says there's something in Mountain Dew.
Okay, new information. Something else.
Maybe the store doesn't have Mountain Dew, it's all out.
Okay, absence of the product. You're up.
I was gonna say, but yeah, I guess. Maybe.
Okay, it's a low hanging fruit answer, the price. There's a 50% sale on this. I like this over there, but at 50% off, I'm taking this, buddy. Doesn't get. So this might give you 10 units of satisfaction. This gives you 9, this gives you 8. But if you get twice as much of this because of 50% off sale, you're not getting 10, you're getting 16. So 16 is more than 10. And I see your behavior and I think, oh, why is this person making that choice? Another variable has changed. So any of the assumptions changing means that the answer is no longer holding the way you thought. So economists use a phrase to freeze all the changes in the model. And this used to be question number 1 on my exams in economics. I kind of stopped doing that. But my first question on every test used to be, what does ceteris paribus mean? Or I would use it in a true-false question or multiple choice question. I used to say ceteris paribus because it took 4 years of Latin. I think I told you that, right? So what does ceteris paribus mean? Professor, we don't study Latin. So in your mind, when you take your camera, you take a picture, and tell everybody say cheese. Everybody's saying cheese, and you get that smile. Do they feel like a smile all the time in their life? No, you engineered it. So ceteris paribus means you freeze everything. Ceteris paribus means holding everything else frozen. Nothing else is changing apart from what I'm doing here. But life is dynamic and things are moving. But if you freeze them, you can't continue to believe that that's the state of reality and stop. So remember that ceteris paribus or ceteris paribus is all else remaining equal. So let's take a look at these two graphs again. When I show you the first graph here, I'm assuming that y is not changing. So y is out of the analysis. I get a partial equilibrium picture showing you part of the story. And by moving the other variable out, I'm assuming it's not a variable. It is not varying. It's still there, but it's not varying. So as long as it's not a variable, now I can tell you a story in 2 dimensions. Can you see down here, or is this too low on the screen? The room is kind of not well designed. The ceiling is too low. But anyway, I'm glad to be in here with 7 students registered, or 6. So both of these are partial equilibrium with respect to the overall function. And the 3-dimensional will be more general, if I could design that. So if you were to try to put these two together, again, I hate drawing this because I mess it up. Imagine taking the top half of a basketball. And then you set that half down, or I would have said the earth. It is the second day of fall, right? The sun is directly overhead. So the day should be 12 hours long, and that should be 12 hours long. What's that called? Autumnal equinox, equal night and day, autumnal. Anyway, enough of that. So all of these would be the curves that you see here. And then at some point at the very top here, that would be here and here simultaneously. Okay? I have two documents up front if you want to collect those. So that would be an attempt to show in 3 dimensions. It took me a long time, oh my goodness, a long time to get to this point. But I hope it's worth it. If not, let me know that I wasted your time today. And I'll try not to be thin-skinned, okay? So as we think that through, again, we're trying to understand the assumptions. General equilibrium assumptions. I said, let's use the Earth rather than the basketball because the Earth is a little more interesting. I'm going to pretend that this is the North Pole. Do you know what these lines are called? You remember? Anybody? Lines of, begins with an L. Latitude. The vertical are called lines of longitude, lines of latitude. And if I put Detroit, I put Chicago here and Detroit here, go across the pond, put New York here, go across the pond, I put Rome here. Again, I don't know this is a fact, but let's assume those 4 cities are at the same level of latitude. If an individual says, I like living at, what's the latitude for Detroit? 40 degrees north? I don't know. I want to live in a temperate region. So let's expand it a little bit more. I want to see 4 seasons. I don't want Florida and Georgia weather. I want 4 seasons. I don't want it too cold. You know, Chicago might be the same as lake effect. So it might be a little colder and more snow. Anyway, the point is that you would expect that these 4 having the same latitude might give individuals the same level of satisfaction. Back to the indifference curve I talked about. So let me try to show you that as an indifference curve. If I look down from the North Pole, so that's my eye right there, what I would see is some concentric circles. Okay, I'm only showing you one portion of the circle. But if I could go, does anyone want to go into outer space? How much does it cost? Like almost $500 million? None of you are interested in that? My wife wants to go. It's a bit broke. I say if you can go for free, by all means go. And hopefully she'll come back, you know, because some of these things explode up there. But now private citizens can go up and be astronauts. Anyway, so if you went up there and looked down from the North Pole, you would see hopefully those 4 cities. And this is the curve that you would see if this is the North Pole up here. So in my attempt of showing you the utility frontier, I'm going to put goods Y and X here. And I'm going to show the 4 cities right here. So remember the analogy of the indifference curve that I started with? I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. Maybe that analogy will work for you. 4 cities on the same latitude if you look down from the North Pole. That's what an indifference curve is, practically. And you take this 3-dimensional analysis of these 2 goods, there is this map that is the indifference curve that shows you the different quantities. And when you look from on high, this is what it's looking like. In 2 dimensions, this is what you're seeing. But 3 dimensions, that's what you're seeing. It's the same thing. But obviously, 2 dimensions means you're taking a snapshot, taking a picture of the reality and simplifying it. So that's where we're going with that assumption. A long way to go to introduce the idea of indifference curves. Again, if you've seen them before and talked about them, I've just wasted some of your time. So we need to introduce indifference curve analysis. I'm thinking that one of the handouts we passed up has this. Yep, so you have that. Equilibrium. We're trying to get to the idea now of equilibrium in economics. Again, I'm writing on this page just to save space, okay? What I'm writing doesn't belong here. 90% of the time when you look at equilibrium, you're looking at equilibrium in partial equilibrium analysis. And this point right here, we'll call it E, P star, Q star. Most of the time you think of equilibrium, that's what you're thinking of, partial equilibrium analysis. But in a general equilibrium model, there are no prices. what happened to the prices? When I first started the class, I showed you two panels side by side. I said the market for sugar in Mexico, well, whatever, two different countries, and you had two different prices, oil in Kuwait and the US. Remember that problem? And I said that like water finding its own level, I may not have said that, but like water finding its own level, if you start with two different levels of equilibrium, they're going to come to a common equilibrium. And one country will be above the equilibrium price, and that country would then be exporting, supply more than demand, and the other country would be below its equilibrium price, and that country would be importing. Remember that? So that's the first idea of equilibrium analysis in a partial equilibrium sense. We're done with this until we get to chapter 6. We're not coming back to that for a while. We're now trying to define equilibrium in a plane that has two goods on the axis. So where was I a minute ago? So I said we have this indifference curve. How do we find equilibrium? Well, we need to add another line. Equilibrium usually involves some kind of intersection. I'll write this word intersection. That's the partial equilibrium approach. And obviously, we need not think within economics. We can think in any sphere. But I'm going to introduce something that you probably should be aware of. In partial equilibrium analysis, equilibrium is shown by an intersection of demand and supply. In general equilibrium analysis, it's shown by a tangency. So the two lines aren't crossing, they're kissing each other. And then they're saying goodbye. Okay. So I need to put another line here that would create the equilibrium, and I'm going to draw a line that touches at one point. A tangency means it's barely touching. Okay. Tangency. And this would be the equilibrium. In a general equilibrium model, the equilibrium is shown as a point of tangency. The two curves are kissing each other. One is barely touching the other. Remember, we said in indifference curve analysis that there's many of these indifference curves. Like lines of latitude. And we'll put another one up here. So another part of what I'm going to ask you to explain is, I'm going to call that points B and C again. And remember, points B and C are bundles, combinations of X and Y. So I'm going to put 8, 2 as an example here. I'll put 2, 8 as an example here. And I'll put this as 5, 5, say. Just to go back to where we were. In the indifference curve analysis, this is indifference curve 1, indifference curve 2, indifference curve 3, indifference curve 4, indifference curve 0. An equilibrium involves that one curve that kisses the other straight line. When we started, I called the straight line the production possibility frontier. So equilibrium, in general equilibrium analysis, is the tangency of the production possibility frontier and the indifference curve. The notion of equilibrium in chapters 2, 3, and 4, certain chapters 3 and 4, 3, 4, and 5, is what you see here. Two goods on the axes and the production possibility frontier, and you look for the highest curve. The last one that's touching the ground before we take off into the air. Notice that indifference curve 3 doesn't touch the production possibility frontier. Indifference curve 1 crosses the production possibility frontier. If you're asked the question, which of these bundles do you prefer? A, B, or C? E, B, or C? E is on a higher indifference curve, so it gives you more satisfaction than B and C. And you'd like to get to indifference curve 2. What about indifference curve 3? I'm going to label that point F. Would you prefer F over E? The answer is yes. A higher level of satisfaction. Remember the overall utility function. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here just to bring that into view. The overall utility function says if you get more of the goods, you get more satisfaction. So point F should put you on a higher level of satisfaction. So why not take point F? Here's where you answer. You're taking point E right now. Why not take point F?
It's not within your budget.
It's not within your budget. But we're not yet at budget. because we haven't brought any prices into the problem. We're going to get the budget in a couple of minutes.
It's not the quantity demanded.
There's no demand. Well, okay, the inverse curve is the demand, but I'm fishing for a different word. It is, and however you phrase it from now on, I'm going to accept anybody. So everybody's living on Earth. The houses are built on Earth. This person's living in an airplane. Ooh. You live in an airplane or space craft? Yeah, living off the air. They're floating, levitating, like a spirit. Somebody,
That just isn't possible.
it's not possible. That's how you say it. It's not possible. Remember, the green line is called a production possibilities curve. So it is beyond your production possibilities. And here's where the magic of international trade and general equilibrium analysis starts. How can you get point F when it's beyond your production possibilities? How can you get something that's outside of your reach to produce? I'm hoping these are low-hanging fruit questions.
I mean, just advancements in society, maybe.
Okay, that would be technological improvement. So that's part of the answer. So I'm going to give you on this page, to get to a point F rather than point E, technological improvement can get you there. Remember, these are all test questions, okay? Technological improvement can get you to a higher and difference curve. But right now, the second approach here is more resources. So the answer here is increase in resources. Increase resources. And this is technological. It does say technological change. So let's abstract from the two of those, and now we're going to allude to prices, but what's this class called again? International trade. Hint, hint, hint. How can you get something that you can't produce? Trade. So now you bring in the idea of trade and say, if I can find someone to trade with who will let me get to point F, that means I have to sell them some stuff. They sell me some stuff, and I get to consume at a point that's outside of my production possibilities. That's where international trade idea starts. All right, so that's where we're going to take off from. I think we've gotten through the first assumption. If you decide to go to graduate school, they're going to peel more layers of this onion. You say, wow, Professor Cabin barely touched the surface of what rational means. Or you can go to your artificial intelligence, and they can probably give you a sense as to what your grad school professor would say about that. All right, without squandering too much of the time, and I know that I could move slowly and I don't want to. Technological change can get you there. Increasing resources can get you there. But if there's no possible technological change right now, and there's no more increase in resources, the way to get the thing that you can't produce is to trade. You have to find somebody else who is able to supply that. So we took care of rational behavior. We said there are two countries. We talked about no money illusion. This is, you don't have any more resources. Factor endowments are fixed. Technologies are fixed. So that took both of these off the table. Got that? If you start the model by saying resources don't change, the technologies don't change, then you can't look at any of the analysis here. So this takes you a little further than the basic assumption. So we're going to relax these assumptions at some point. But when Ricardo's starting out, he says, right now, we'll keep it simple. The old KISS formula, keep it simple. And let's see what we can do from there. The only way, if these two aren't possible to get there, is to find somebody else to cooperate with. Trade is good. By the way, you're right. At the top of your test, trade is good at giving extra point automatically. Trade is good. It's my way of brainwashing you to believe that trade is a good thing. 1 point doesn't change anybody's grade, so I'm giving you nothing. I have students who would write that if they take a second class with me or third class, they'll keep writing trade is good. Because every time they write it, I give them 1 extra credit. All right. So where are we? We're now asking the question about the Edgeworth box, and I did introduce that before. I think I've taken care of, oh, budget. Yes, the idea of budget. So somewhere you should see a page that says budget constraint change. You see that? Yes? And I'm going to cheat a little. I don't know if you can cheat. Can you cheat as well? Yes, you can. So it's copied in a way that you can put the two of them next to each other. I call it cheating only to stimulate, I don't like cheating, but I call it cheating to stimulate the idea that. What do you think I did when I was putting this together? I did it in Word, because I'm so like old fashioned, I refuse to learn anything like PowerPoint, refuse. I've done PowerPoint presentations to go elsewhere, like make a presentation, other than that, I've never taught using PowerPoint. But the thing is, I don't want to say stupid, but. It doesn't involve you enough, pardon me for that terrible thing. What do you think I did here? Anybody?
Copy and paste it.
Copy and paste it. Or you change the labels. I just change the labels and say, okay, make two, copy paste, then change the label. It's exactly the same thing with different labels. To say that what we just talked about in terms of technological change and increase in endowments of resources, economic growth, we can now bring prices into analysis using the same analysis. And that's what motivates it as international trade. First of all, there's no second country here. So the only way to get more is to grow or to improve your technology. Now that I'm going to introduce the idea of trade, I have to bring prices into the problem. And the price might be an opportunity cost. It's not an explicit number. Hey, I give you 2 markers for your computer or your water. You want to trade? 2 pencils for your computer. 2 pencils for your bottle of water. Really? Yeah. The point is that you have to find a way to get to that equilibrium. And if you don't have prices, then you negotiate, okay, 3, okay, 4. But since these have a price or a cost, I'm just increasing the offer to him to make a trade. So sometimes the prices aren't in your face. For example, nobody knows the price of these pens, but the offer, the rate at which I'm exchanging becomes the price. 1 bottle of water equals 4 of these. What's the actual price? We don't know, but we know that a trade occurred. So you don't actually need the prices. It can all be exchanges of goods, one good for the other. But somehow, magically, you can also impute a price and say, okay, well, if we know the price for the bottle of water, then we can figure out what the price of the pens are. If the bottle of water costs $2, then each of these pens, if they're not used, 50 cents each. They might cost more than that. And if they cost more than that, you got a good deal. I value the water more than the $2 worth of pens. So the prices are imputed when they're not explicit. And magically, since we didn't introduce any actual prices, the prices are hidden, subsumed. So just as we talked about opportunity costs as the stop of the production line, we can introduce a budget line that's equivalent to the opportunity cost. In fact, we'd say, I'm going to work with the first curve here, okay? Pretend the second one doesn't exist. Difference curve 0 and budget production possibility frontier 0. That's our equilibrium, point E. And I'm assuming the slope of the production possibility frontier, which is constant, is equal to the slope of the indifference curve. And you know the slope of a curve is always changing. Every point on the curve has a different slope. So I'll then be able to say, whatever price comes out of the production possibility frontier is coming from the indifference curve. Because the indifference curve slope at that particular point is the ratio of the prices. So let me get back to the second part of this analysis here. And I'm trying to make the point that you don't actually need prices, but you can impute prices. So budget constraint. The goods are labeled S and T. So I'm going to say PS times S plus PT times T equals your income. The income that is earned is coming from these 2 goods. If I'm producing both of these goods and I'm producing at a point right here for myself, and there's no second country, I don't actually have any prices, but the prices are imputed. In order to see what the prices are, the slope of the production possibility frontier will be assumed to be the ratio of prices. Let me rewrite this equation with S as the subject. So I'm going to say S equals, I'm going to bring the PTT over on the the right-hand side and divide each side by PS. Are you with me? I'm isolating S. So I'm going to divide by PS, sorry, divide by PS. And magically, the slope of the line with S as the vertical axis and T on the horizontal axis is the ratio of prices. Price ratio. Sometimes the literature calls it relative prices or the relative price line. So in general equilibrium analysis, the slope of the budget constraint is the ratio of prices or the relative prices. And notice because it was the same analysis that I used for the production possibility frontier, I'm going to rewrite what I said earlier. I said earlier in the semester, LS plus LT equals L, the total amount of labor I have allocated to the two sectors. So that's my labor constraint. I will now multiply and divide by S, multiply and divide by T, and I've changed that into a ratio ALS, which is LS over S, and a ratio ALT, which is LT over T equals L. And I want you to look at these two. I'll call this 1, and I'll call this 2. And when I rewrite 1 with S as the subject, it's going to get a little tricky because I don't have the right spacing. Let's see how that works. S equals, I'm going to bring the ALT over on the other side, L minus ALTT. I'm going to divide everything by ALS. And I have the same equation. I'm going to write it here. S equals L over ALS minus ALT over ALS. These two equations right here are the same equation. I said that the ratio of prices, remember by yourself, there are no obvious prices. You know the input-output ratios for the two products, how many units it takes to produce each one of those. So the ratio of prices, I'm going to try to make this a test question as well. The ratio of prices is the opportunity cost. This is the slope of the line. The slope of the budget constraint and the slope of the production possibility frontier, when you have no trade, it's exactly the same slope. I'm thinking that we can work some magic with this. All right. So let's get back to the idea of trade now. And I said, you're not going to use the opportunity cost as your prices when you start to trade. The opportunity cost is the price when there's no trade. But when you find a second country that you want to trade with, the opportunity cost will not be the price you will use. You're going to use actual relative prices. So on line 1, I'll call that PT on PS subscript 0. I'm going to zoom in here because I really want for you to get this. I think I apologize already for international trade starting with general equivalent analysis, which means you have to be thinking, otherwise you're going to get lost. If you write PS on PT, I'm not going to give any credit. So you have to try and figure out how do I remember. If he tells me manufacturing and agriculture and I choose to label them certainly, what is the actual slope? There's an easy way to remember. PTT. So the PT, if T is your horizontal axis, PT is going to be the numerator because it comes from this equation right here. Okay? I need for you to get that. Got that? Everybody? PTT. If T is on your horizontal axis, the ratio is going to be PT on PS. It has to be, because all I'm doing is juggling the equation. I'm dividing through by PS to get that ratio. So you would say, and this is again, the idea of using the term relative prices. As you read the textbook and you figure this out, you'll say the relative price of textiles. It's lingo that, I mean, if you mess up, you get no credit. Relative is, I was asking you earlier about ratio, rational. Relative and ratio are related. Okay? So the ratio of prices, which goes in the numerator, the variable on the horizontal axis. And after you do enough of these, this will become like second nature to you. So you'll say the relative price of textiles. It means the price of textiles relative to the other thing. In this case, soybeans. The price of textiles relative to. So the way you start the sentence, price of textiles relative to, sometimes called the relative price of textiles, or the relative price line, textiles over soybean. Just remember what it is, PT and PS. Please don't mess that up, because there's no forgiveness if you mess that one up. I'm showing you how to remember, how to label that. I'll ask you to label the budget line. What is the relative price? More importantly, to use it. So I'm going to label the second curve PT on PS 1, subscript 1. And we're trying to trade to get beyond what we can produce at point E to a point such as point F, which is outside of our production possibility set. Here's the production possibility set. You can only consume what you produce if you don't have a second country. Having a second country will allow you to consume beyond what is possible in production. So notice the price relative or the ratio of prices. In order to get to point F, I'm going to ask everyone to look up here so that I can know that I'm talking to you. In order to get to point F, I'm going to have to produce at this point and then buy this quantity of good F. I'm going to export this amount of S and import that quantity of good T. In order to be able to consume point F, I need to sell something to them. Remember, you can consume at point S. You get less satisfaction. You can produce at point S. So you're working out with the second country. Now, where should I produce so that you can sell me what I want? In order for our country to be able to choose to produce at point S and consume at point F, it has to have the higher, in this case, the country with the lower opportunity cost of textiles will export textiles. So these are like the hidden questions that will be asked once it's presented in the graph. If you end up producing at point S, means that you have the lower opportunity cost of producing S. It's cheaper for you to produce S for them. That's why you're selling S. You're producing more to export it. They're buying it from you because it's cheaper. And why are you buying T? Textiles? Because they can produce it relatively cheaper. They have the lower opportunity cost. Remember I said the country with the flatter slope produces the thing on the horizontal axis. If you're producing the thing on the vertical axis, it means that you have the steeper slope. Again, these are like the hidden assumptions once you understand, or hidden conclusions based on the assumptions you've made. If you have the steeper, the good you're exporting means that you have the lower opportunity cost of producing that. The good you're importing means you have the higher opportunity cost of producing that. So you let the country with the lower opportunity cost export to you. So this is showing the relative price of textiles. The country with a flatter budget line, flatter production possibility frontier, will have the lower opportunity cost of textiles. Country with the lower cost exports the product. This means that you have the lower cost of producing soybean. So you put all of your resources into soybean, you export soybean to get to point F, obviously. So you're producing production and you're consuming at point F. Consumption. In order to get from where you produce to where you consume, you have to trade. And that's the conclusion of the idea that two countries recognizing each other, they have to have different opportunity costs. So another question I'll throw on the test. Two countries have identical opportunity costs. Who would export what? No trade will occur. If you both have the same slope, remember I said the flatter slope exports the thing on the horizontal axis. The two countries have the same opportunity costs. No trade will occur. In the Ricardian model, once we get to chapter 4, we're going to see that there's a different model that allows that, but it has to change another assumption in the theory. And the assumption it will change is one factor of production. So our model says there's one factor of production labor, assumption number 11. And then the next chapter, we will say that there are two factors of production: labor and capital. We're not there yet. Hopefully, we'll get there within a week. But I'm saying that Ricardo started out by saying, let there be one resource. When you have one resource, this is your production possibility frontier and set. And the only way to get from point E to point F is by trading. What's the pattern of trade? The country with the flatter slope for T will export T, which means the country with the steeper slope for T will export S. You can always switch the labels around. For example, very quickly, sorry about that. If I put T here and S here, this is the production possibility frontier. This will be the flatter. So our country will be exporting, consuming at a point here. We're going to export S and import T if you draw the graph the other way around. The thing on the horizontal, if you're exporting that, that has to be the in which you have the lower cost or the lower opportunity cost. So the opportunity cost becomes kind of like a price. Let me summarize. The ratio of prices determines the opportunity cost, or is determined by the opportunity cost. I didn't say that very eloquently, so let me try one more time. Let's need a blank sheet of paper here. I can't find a blank sheet, so pretend this is a blank sheet. Let's summarize where we are. The two countries. Two PS on PT ratios. Obviously, two ALT on ALS ratios. The country with the lower ratio will export the thing on the horizontal axis. This should be PT on S. It doesn't really matter to be consistent with the graph. It doesn't, yeah. So you have two ratios. The country with a flatter slope will produce the thing on the horizontal axis. So let me try to show that to you in terms of what you have in front of you. And then we'll probably end there for today. Back to the page that says equilibrium. You have that page? Yes? All right. So this is where I pull the two countries together. We'll call this country A, call this country B. I almost feel like I'm forcing you to accept this Edgeworth box analysis, because the textbooks don't usually like to focus on it, partly because drawing the Edgeworth box might be tricky. Last time I said you just take the second country, country B. Here's country B. And you take it and you rotate it 180 degrees. Same slope, origin for country B. Then you push the two of them together until they touch at a point. Two different slopes for the two different countries. And the first point at which they touch is the specialization point. I'll call it trade specialization point. Because you're asking what are the price relatives or the opportunity costs. So notice that country A, this is its relative price when there's no trade. Let me rewrite what I said earlier. ALT on ALS is equal to PT on PS. Pardon me if this is like dry and not really working for you. This is from the production possibility frontier. And this is when you turn it into a budget line, budget constraint. Remember, when there's no trade, the opportunity cost is effectively the ratio of prices. Okay? When there's no trade, it's the same line. I just think I showed that to you when I put the two pages next to each other. It's the same graph, I just changed the labels, and I call one a budget constraint, the other was a production possibility frontier. The space underneath is effectively identical. So here's what we have. Country A is, I'm going to call this point S0, T0, call it point E. A country is consuming at point E, the bundle S0, I'll put T0, S0, T0, S0, because we label x-axis first for some reason. That's the bundle at point E. There's a second country, country B, which also has its own equilibrium, its own ratio of prices, which is effectively the opportunity cost. I'll call that point F. I'm not choosing the labels meaningfully here, but call that point F. That's the equilibrium for country B, country A. We're almost done with this magic. So I'm going to call this point S. Can I write S upside down that way? Yeah. S1, and I'll call this T1. You can label whatever you want. I'm just trying to be able to talk about them from a distance. So this is the equilibrium in country A, and the equilibrium country B. I'll call it F, which is T1, S1. I'm going to throw some numbers in just to keep you a little more interested, okay? So it's not like 100% dry stuff. Call this number 100. Call this number 100. Call this number 100. Call this number 100. So both countries are getting 100 units of each good when they operate separately, like two islands. But once there's specialization, and our country A decides to go with this opportunity cost product, most of bundle S here at the top, the other country is going to specialize in T. So A specializes in S, and B specializes in T. I said almost done like 3 times already, right? Notice what happens. The total quantity of goods produced is greater than the sum of A and B. What A got in production, and what B got in production. Now we're going to get even more goods. So I'm going to call this delta S. That's the gain that we would get when we specialize. We'll call this delta T. So the world gets more of both goods when there's production based on your comparative advantage, when there's specialization and comparative advantage. Notice that instead of getting this quantity in one country, this quantity in the second country, you almost have to like rotate your body to see that this is the origin for country B. This is the origin for country A. So that quantity right there, and this quantity right there, is this quantity right here. Notice that with specialization, the world gets extra units of good S. See that? Rather than 100 and 100, now the total length is maybe 250. This is 100, this is 100. Let's call that 50. The world gets more. Likewise over here, instead of 100, 100, we're going to get another 50. So more gets produced when there's specialization. So the world has more goods. I think you got this earlier when I first introduced opportunity cost. There's more. Now the question is, how do you allocate the more? So if the world now has 50 more units of each good, how do you allocate it? This is a test question. How would you allocate? Would you say, hey, if I cooperate with you, and now we get to 250, I want the extra 50 units of S, you can have the other 50 units of T. Since I'm producing good S, I'm going to give you back, I need everybody to listen to this. I'm going to give you back what you gave up in production. Okay, you were producing 100 of each. I'm asking you to stop producing soybean. Let me produce soybean, and I'll give you back the 100 that you were producing. If you produce textiles, I'll give up producing textiles. You give me back the 100 I gave up. Talk to me. So now country A has 150 units of soybean. Country B has 150 units of textiles, and they're both at the same level of the other good that they had before. You need somebody to say something.
Like the numbers would make it easier for me personally.
Mhm.
The Edgeworth box just doesn't, I've seen it before. It wasn't, I don't know, it's not clear to me.
All right, so I threw some numbers in, and that kind of
Like when you're saying this country's giving up this, to the other country, but it's getting this in return, I feel like it'd make it easier for me, just as a learner, to see it as a formula. This person is giving this up, this person is giving this up, this person is getting this.
All right,
Obviously, it's probably not as complex as I'm making it out to be, but it would come.
first time around, you hold the back of the bike.
Right.
Let go of the bike and you'll ride by yourself. Somebody else, take a comment. So what I'm proposing is that they ask each other to specialize. And I made you whole in what you gave up. Could you specialize in this? Stop producing, so country A is telling country B, can you stop producing soybean? I'll give you the soybean. I will stop producing textiles, and you give me the textiles I'm producing. And from that cooperation, the country that stopped producing one thing gets back what it gave up, but it has 50 more units of the other thing. That's a win. Both countries have 50 more units of the product they're exporting. I want somebody to at least push that a little further so we can end the class.
I was just thinking that would it be opportunity cost?
So here's what I was hoping you would say. Why not make it 125, 125? Why would you want 50 more units of the product that you're exporting? Wouldn't you prefer 25 units of the other thing? More of both goods rather than more of one? You already were at this point, so why do you want more soybean just because you're good at it? You're selling to them, sell them even more. And they would happily buy it, and they'll happily sell you more textiles. So what we'll end up seeing, I'm going to draw a rectangle here out of those two dimensions. Some point in here, I'll call it G. Some point in the middle of the box will have us, both countries getting more of both goods. Both countries are getting more of both goods. So both countries move to a higher indifference curve. I'm going to clean that graph up because it's, yeah, no, both countries are getting more of both goods. Then I'll stop. So we're now in here. I call it being in the belly of the fish. I don't know, as an undergraduate, I said, okay, the solution is in the belly of the fish. So country A moves from point E to point G on a higher indifference curve. Remember, more is better. More is preferred to less. So that's the gain that our country will get, more of both. And the other country would have moved from point F to point G. This will be indifference curve 1 in country A. This is indifference curve 0 in country A. And this green curve here is indifference curve 1 in country B. And this original here is indifference curve 0 in country B. I think I'm out of time. Both countries have moved to a higher indifference curve. Trade is good. They're both winners, but what made it possible to get to the high indifference curve? Trade. Of course, you could have said if you kept the original, well, I think I'll stop there. Both countries are better off. So this is what Ricardo was trying to convince us of, that by trading, both countries can be better off. I'll pick up there next time. I was asking the class to work on the problem here, but I'm giving attendance credit. So if you can take, those of you who haven't done it, just put your name on this page here, so I can give you attendance credit. Those who can wait. If you turn it, if you have notes on it, you might not want to turn it.
Yeah, I mean, I know for mine.
Well, so take, write your name on this one.
All right.
If you want another one, I can. Okay, I just need to know who's coming to class. Right up on the side of the problem. One thing. We'll finish that problem next class. That's your test question. I'm trying to come on time so that we can make this an earlier assignment for everybody. I'll give more credit if you did it and then you didn't do it. Take care.
Improvement, and we expect to be able to produce more of good wine. Of course, if you decided